Hello, welcome to Liberatory Imagination. I'm your host, Tiffany, and today I want to talk about how do I and how do we cultivate a diverse and abundant interior landscape. How I like to think about my internal landscape is this visualization of literally landscape, of different parts where they have different ecosystems, there's different paths, there are different roads, there's different altitudes, there are different types of plants and dryness, wetness. The soil is different in different arenas. It represents the vastness and diversity that I embody. It represents parts where I'm very familiar with this arena when it comes to this part where it has to do with this particular wound as a child, or I'm very familiar about this adaptation of survival. I'm very familiar with this part of the map where it's how I imagine and how I play. And there are parts that I can kind of see where it's far away and I haven't really spent time exploring it, but I know that I will go there one day. All these ecosystems and landscapes are always changing, like how the earth is right now. But the thing about my internal landscape is that I am the only one that can really enter it. I'm the only one that can really portal into this place and explore it. I can tell people about what I learned. I can tell people what the texture is like. I can tell people about my exploration and discoveries, but they cannot travel into my internal landscape. And I love reading, especially under speculative fiction, and I love engaging in art and storytelling because it is an expression of someone else's interior landscape that I get a little glimpse of. And it's so inspiring because when I see someone being very familiar with their internal landscape, it really invites me to tap into my own and to be like, oh wow, have I explored that path yet? Have I explored this terrain yet? Because it's so cool to hear about other people's experiences. For me, the part about interior landscape that really sparks something for me is in relationship and my behavior. I use a lot of imagery in my writing about North Star and also journey and path. Water has been a very thematic part of how I talk. It resonates and I return back to it again and again because I just think it's such a great way to express something that I feel about my internal landscape. It must have been more than 10 years ago, maybe in 2014 or 15. I did my first collection of paintings that was featured at Baker Miller in Chicago. And that collection of painting was inspired by the desert. There were many, many years where I was so drawn to the desert. I painted thematically within that texture and those colors for a really long time. I remember years after I was still feeling really drawn to those colors, I was asking myself, does this still resonate? And I remember being like, yes, it does. I am still so drawn to the theme of desert. It wasn't from the perspective that a desert is barren or lifeless. It was the opposite. I found it really fascinating to see what really thrived in the desert. I was a Christian back then, so I was also really drawn to the thought about wandering in the desert and seeking home, not knowing when that would come. This is so random, but I recently pulled out old scraps of paintings, and a lot of the colors that I used was from that color palette. And I'm going to show it to you right now. The reds and the golds, the browns, is something I'm still very, very much drawn to. Over the years, it's been really fun to externalize my internal landscape and to see corners of it represented visually, whether it is the desert or water, ocean, trees, mountains. And I started to think about this concept of internal landscape in the past week or so because I've noticed that some people or a lot of people are afraid to enter into their internal landscape because when they try to tap into something that only they know and they can see or feel, it's scary. And when they do get tapped into it, it feels really daunting, and that the land might feel really barren, and that there are a lot of shadows and things that might pop up where they're afraid. Because I know what that feels like too, that there are parts of my internal landscape where I'm like, I really don't want to go there right now. My former therapist would call it, it's okay if you put that book back on the shelf because you can revisit the shelf later. And I think that applies to the internal landscape where there are regions where we're not ready to go into and to explore. And also, there might be shame. We might discover things about ourselves that we're scared to discover, like we're not enough, or something would surprise us and make us feel really scared and dysregulated. Nobody likes to feel that. But what I've learned is that that arena, those places, and those corners are part of a larger landscape, are part of a larger map. It has taken many years of finding different lands, finding different parts and being more familiar with certain parts that gives me more trust with myself of how do I hold myself? How do I deepen my trust for myself? How do I deepen the love for myself with seeing things from a higher vantage point? And it takes bravery. It takes being able to meet ourselves honestly. There are certainly lots of things to delight in, things to discover, and things to celebrate, but the pioneering in this landscape just takes bravery. It takes relationship with ourselves to be strengthened. It takes the bravery to be self-corrected and to be able to see reality with accuracy and precision. That means that we have to be able to break narratives that we are very familiar with. And I keep on talking about this all the time because that's one of my life lessons and probably something that I will have to learn again and again. Last year, I did this workshop with my dear friend Peregrine, and we did two workshops around mistakes. Yeah, and we explored what does it take to break a pattern and a loop that we feel like we are stuck in, where we feel like people always do this to me, that this hurt or this pain is like a boomerang, that this always happens, and to realize we have agency to break the loop. We have agency to try new things. And I think that the truth is a lot of us are more scared of the unknown than to be stuck in a loop. And I'm talking about not intellectually because I feel like all of us are like, I'm ready to break the loop. I'm ready to break the pattern, but on a body basis. Most of us are conditioned to want to stay with what is familiar, to stay with what is known, than to feel the dysregulation of the unknown. But the braver we are to acknowledge it and to try something else little by little, the more pathways open to us. And something that I have been thinking about a lot is about my triggers. I wrote about it in my last Substack post. When it comes to the landscape, how I think about it is that from the start of the trigger, I want to be so familiar of every bend in the road when it comes to timing and how my body feels and things that keep on looping in my brain about what's happening in my narrative. I want to become so familiar with that path that I am also so familiar the path back to center, back to reality, back to myself, feeling at home in my body. Following that loop, that path is very, very important. And what happens when I'm very familiar with every curve in the road, when I'm familiar with the trees and the landmarks, I can predict myself. And when I can predict myself, I can now experiment with trying something new where it's like, okay, I know every time when I turn this corner, my body feels really out of control, but I know that in 5 minutes, my body will start to feel more regulated and my breathing will be more steady. So, what if I wait 5 minutes and know that I will always come back before I talk more, before I react, before I make a decision, before anything? What if I let myself have those 5 minutes? And even better, what if I can verbalize to people around me that this is my path and that I will be a lot calmer and grounded at the end of the arc? And then if I'm really trying to do something new, is that I know at this bend, I usually do this. So what if I place something for myself here, like a glass of water or a walk and off-road, totally go somewhere else? Let's see. Let's see if I can do that and see if it helps because maybe it doesn't. But we're open to discovery. When I'm able to know this path really well, it gives me more agency and also It helps me be more accountable to my words and my actions. And the fruit of that is that there is more compassion, there is more tenderness, there is deeper love and trust to myself and also to those around me. Because the more that I can deepen that, the more I can extend it to other people from a place of groundedness and integrity. Because my definition of integrity is based on how do I see myself in a larger picture of our liberation. How do I want to be treated, which is with dignity and agency, with honor, with respect. And that I believe that every single person here on earth deserves that. It is everyone's right to be treated with dignity and in all of their humanity, free from imperialism, colonialism, prisons, and police. So integrity is knowing that that is the North Star, and that informs my whole ecosystem. How I talk to myself, how I talk to others, how I treat my body, how I treat other people's bodies. True integrity is the through line from that North Star. And there are a couple rules of how do we know our internal landscape well as how do we cultivate our landscape, because it is always changing. And I have a say in how do I create this area to be more luscious, to be more rich, to have deeper roots or more expansive waterways. I get to shape it. And one of the rules is that the only way you can really cultivate this landscape is when you are alone. We cannot perform our way into shaping the landscape. We can't prove our way into cultivating the landscape because the landscape reflects the most honest and truest parts of us. We are conditioned to perform under colonialism. We're conditioned to perform for survival, and we all got to do it. But this arena, our internal landscape, invites us into thinking about who are we? What are we grounded in apart from performance improving? And so the only way to really get into that state, to get into the honesty of it, is when we spend time with ourselves, quality time with ourselves. And when there's too much going on in the outside, it's really hard to tap into what's going on internally. Not to say that you can't. When I'm having conversations with my friends, loved ones, partner, I can feel my internal landscape. And like what I said about that trigger loop, I can tap into what's happening and what bend I am in the trigger loop, at least most of the time. Sometimes I totally can't tap into it. But the cultivation takes discipline. It takes stepping back from the external acting and the external relating, which is not bad. It's about the discipline of coming back and tapping into what is true and honest by ourselves for an extended time. I wouldn't be able to tap into it if it happened once a month for 5 minutes. Eventually, I'd feel so far away from it that it will take a lot more time to enter into that portal to be able to see things from a grounded place. And for me, that looks like making space, carving out time where the stimulus of life is dimmed, meaning I don't have any music in the background. I don't have a ton of plans this week. I'm canceling meetings. I am feeling whatever is present. And a lot of times it's dysregulation. And it's tapping into how do I feel? And it's practicing holding myself with tenderness, with softness. And for me, it's providing myself that space that I wasn't provided when I was younger, which is deep listening. It isn't based on projection from other people. It is tender without performance. It is softness, gentleness that I deserved as a child, which I don't feel like was extended to me. So it's doing that work to be like, how can I consistently, with discipline, meet myself in that space? With time, that internal landscape not only has spots where it's really scary, it feels like there are hauntings there, but it also feels like where I go to imagine, where I go to play, where I go to explore creative thoughts and to create art, where I want to learn and where I want to take chances on a relationship, and where I can really see things in color, where I can grieve well. Grieving is such an important part, and I feel like I can always tap into it anytime, because this lifetime is perpetually grieving. I've been doing this practice for a while where it really doesn't feel right to witness death and genocide in a way that is really fast. And so every day or so, I learn about someone who is martyred in Palestine or in Lebanon or here on Turtle Island, and I read their names. I find out as much as I can about their story, and I sit with it. And it's this spiritual practice of how do I grieve on multiple levels as well as honor dignity. Recently, I saw two stories of twins where there was a father in Palestine of two newborn twins who was martyred in Palestine. And then I found out, and then there was a mother pregnant with twins who was also martyred in Palestine. And it's this deep feeling of never-ending grief that I want to be able to access at all times because it indicates to me that I am still in touch with my human spirit. I'm still in touch with the devastating loss of human life from genocide, from imperial evils like Israel and the US. And my relationship with my internal landscape is so key to this because it's getting closer to my North Star, to my integrity, that this is a very important part. And I think that I will always be adapting to how do I keep this part of myself tender? How do I grieve well? Meaning that it doesn't drive me to a consistent place of freeze, but where it drives me to a consistent place of grounding and confidence in the steps that I make. Yeah, so we each have to carve out intentional, high quality alone time in order to cultivate this landscape well. And it also doesn't mean that it can't be done in community and relationship. It actually needs it, but only if we put in that one-on-one time with ourselves. Like that's where it really, really gets abundant. Also want to note that this isn't a form of numbing or escapism or maladaptive daydreaming because I know what that's like. I know what it's like to want to go really far away to cope with feeling overwhelmed. And talking about maladaptive daydreaming, I used to do that a lot as a kid. I used to go far away to different conversations and relationships and things to do in my little child head to feel emotionally engaged and to feel like I have autonomy. This is not that. This is actually tapping into what is very real, very present, and very honest. We go into these landscapes, we visit our internal landscape, not because we want to run away, but because we want to actually be more present. Creativity is such a beautiful place to tap into our internal landscape on our own. And it could be writing, painting, drawing, poetry, doing textiles, it could be music. It gives us something tangible to explore. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to just like close your eyes and imagine your internal landscape, which you can, but to draw it out and or to write it out, to sing it out, to weave it out is a beautiful practice to hold our attention, to follow a thought all the way through, to tap into how do we feel and to not quickly try to escape from it. That's the practice, that's the devotion that we deserve to extend to ourselves. I think about all the ways that I have robbed myself of expansiveness because it felt really scary to pay such close attention. But it's a practice of extending unconditional love to ourselves, of like, okay, I might find that I have to take accountability for this, or that I might find that this was born out of shame. But the unconditional love extended to myself tells me that's okay. You get to make mistakes and you get to repair and you get to apologize every single step of the way. I get to land my foot on solid ground because my unconditional love for myself is firm. What I know for sure is the world I want to build and the world I want to see. For sure, I know that I deserve dignity like everyone else does. So, in the times of wobbliness or the times of unsure or fear, it's the returning back to that solid ground, that rock, that rootedness, however way I want to tap into that imagery, that becomes very important and very comforting. Another rule of this land is that it goes by its own time, meaning I can plant a seed right now and I might be able to harvest it in a couple days. I might be able to harvest it in a month. And sometimes I will get to harvest it in 10 years, 20 years, where it's way more clear and the fruit is so much more rich and developed. Because I can see the seeds that I planted 10, 15 years ago in my 20s. Only now am I really able to see and recognize, oh, wow, that's such a gift. I'm reaping the fruit of it right now. And it's really cool because nothing is a waste. So the questions that I have for myself is how can I continue to plant seeds? How can I continue to cultivate the land? How can I deepen the roots? How can I learn how to swim or to ride the waves in a way that is more and more aligned with my integrity? That is more and more aligned with my North Star. How can I build a relationship that doesn't take my eye away from my internal landscape, but that actually focuses me in a little bit more every day? How can I infuse it with more devotion, more softness, more tenderness, and more love in a way that is very boundaried, that is very firm, that is very strong? For my ending question, what does liberatory imagination spark in me today? It sparks in me a sense of hopefulness that there are so many more lands and bodies of water for me to discover within myself. I'm so multidimensional. I am so magical that it's exciting to think about all the ways that my landscape will change over the years. It's so exciting to think about discoveries of myself. I'm really looking forward to understanding myself and to aging into a deeper, wiser version of myself all the time. It sparks in me the hope of the vastness of grief that I'm able to hold. And sometimes it feels like drowning. Sometimes it does feel like I will never be able to stop crying. But it's because I'm able to grieve and I'm able to witness myself and others. It gives me the ability to forge forward with bravery. So that's it for today. I would love to hear your thoughts. What is your internal landscape like? How do you like to explore it? What are some lessons from your art practices that help you dive deeper into it? Please subscribe, like, and comment on this video. I would love to hear your thoughts. All right, that's it for today. Thank you for tuning in. More from me next time.